They dismembered her body and ate her with potatoes. 16-year-old Karina Bardachan attended a party at an apartment that two of her friends lived at. The apartment residents were two 20-year-old men, Maxim and Yuri. Karina had a crush on Maxim and was so infatuated with him that she decided to stay at the apartment even after the other guests had left. Later that night, Karina and Maxim went into the bathroom together. Maxim took his clothes off and sat on top of Karina in the bathtub. Maxim held Karina's feet underwater and signaled for Yuri to come in. Yuri entered the bathroom and then held Karina's head underwater until she drowned and passed away. Yuri and Maxim then dismembered Karina's body. The two men cooked the meat on Karina's body and then baked her flesh with potatoes. They consumed the meal that they made with Karina's body along with the potatoes. Yuri and Maxim even fed Karina's body to their roommate, who had no idea that she was eating a human being. When police arrested the men, they claimed that they did it because they were intoxicated and hungry. Maxim was sentenced to 19 years in prison, and Yuri was sentenced to 18 years in prison, which, in my opinion, is not even close to the amount of time that they should have gotten. But what do you guys think about this case?
He thought he was flirting with a girl online. Within 6 hours, he was dead. I need you to share this disgusting scam with your brothers, your neighbours, your teenage kids. It's honestly horrific and it could happen to anyone. It started as a very normal day in 2022 in Michigan. Jordan DeMay was a 17-year-old who had a life that honestly most kids dreamed of. He was homecoming king, he was really athletic and very popular at school. One day, totally out of the blue, he got this message on socials off a girl and she was very attractive. She started flirting with him out the blue and he was like, jackpot. He couldn't believe his luck, so he started flirting back. Seemed all very innocent at first. And things kind of escalated in this chat where the conversation was a little bit more heated. And he's a teenage boy, so he was loving it. Suddenly she sends him this explicit photo of herself and he's kind of like, whoa, where did that come from? But he wasn't complaining. She was like, aren't you gonna send one back? And she starts pressuring him more and more, send me a picture back. So eventually he gave in and he sent her one in exchange. Then the tone instantly changed. The girl just immediately started demanding money off him and he was like, where has this come from? Like, we were having such a nice conversation and then all of a sudden she just seemed to turn evil. She starts sending messages like, just pay me right now and I won't expose you. Bear in mind, she's got a naked photo of him now. Now, Jordan's 17, remember, he doesn't have a lot of money to just willy-nilly send over to this girl, but panicking, he sent over all he had, which was $300. She kept demanding more. She was like, no, I want 1,000. It probably won't surprise you by this point that it wasn't a girl on the other side of the screen. It was actually two brothers from Nigeria. And Jordan was freaking out. He was like, I don't have any more money to send you. This person was threatening to send this naked photo of him to his family and friends. He begged the scammer. He was like, I'm gonna unalive myself if you don't leave me alone. And this is absolutely disgusting that this is the message he received back, that like a human could treat another human this way. They replied, good, do that fast or I'll make you do it, I swear to God. Seeing no way out, feeling like his life was over, Jordan grabbed a G from his family home and did the unthinkable. Before we look at what happened next, I just want to make you aware of what to do if you are in a case like this. These scams have been linked to over 27 self-unalivings in the US alone. Please remember, if you're targeted by one of these scammers and you fall for it, just remember it's not your fault. It's actually a crime for them to expose you. So screenshot the messages for evidence, report the account, block them. It's very unlikely that they would actually go to the extent of contacting your family, your friends, and sending them the pictures of you, because like, what are they going to do that for? It'd be committing a crime for nothing. Basically, once they've shared the photos, they haven't got anything to threaten you with anymore. Therefore, they're not going to make any money from doing that. The scammers are known as Yahoo boys, and I don't know if anybody remembers like the Nigerian prince scam that went round on email via Yahoo years ago in the 2000s. Well, they've basically just moved to different platforms and different methods for their cyber frauds. And it's mostly because of unemployment and poverty in the area. Samuel and Samson Ogoshi got 17 years in prison each. I think this is a serious message to scammers that actually we're going to expose you.
She didn't just murder her victims, she would bake some of their remains into cupcakes and put others into bars of soap. She would then freely hand these out to people, them having no idea that they were bathing in and physically eating human remains. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is serial killer Leonarda Cianciulli. Leonarda was born in Italy in April 1893, and from the offset she didn't have a good relationship with her mother Amelia. Amelia fell pregnant with Leonarda after she was assaulted by a man who she was then forced to marry. Amelia was actually disowned and shunned by her own family for falling pregnant, and all of this anger and hatred she directed at her daughter Leonarda. In her teen years, Amelia had arranged for Leonarda to marry this man. He was well off, he was financially secure, and his social status would have been really good for Leonarda's family. However, she refused to marry him. Leonarda had fallen in love with civil servant Raphael Cianciulli and decided that she was going to marry him instead. This made Amelia so angry that she actually put a curse on Leonarda, saying that evil would follow her entire life. One of Leonarda's goals in her life was to have many children and to live within a big happy family unit where she would shower her kids with the love that she never got growing up. Sadly for her, however, she would fall pregnant between 14 and 17 times, and only 4 of her children made it to infancy. She would suffer several miscarriages, stillbirths, and have many children who died shortly after being born. Without a doubt, this would have been absolutely devastating for Leonarda, and she likely blamed her mother Amelia for this after Amelia had put that curse on her. She developed what we would now consider severe anxiety about her children's health and their life in general. She was in a constant state of fear that they were going to die. In 1930, Leonarda, Raphael, and their 4 children would all move to Correggio, Italy, after their hometown had suffered from a massive earthquake which destroyed everything that they owned and killed almost all of their neighbours. The family was lucky to have gotten out of that alive. The people of Correggio would welcome in the family with open arms, and Leonarda settled in quickly. Over time, she became a very trusted member of the community. People would go to her for guidance, for advice. She became a pillar of the community, someone that everyone trusted. She opened up her own shop where she would sell herbs and soaps and tasty baked goods. She would also tell people's fortunes, and honestly she just seemed like that person who always had the answer. If you had a problem, you could go to Leonarda and she would help you solve it. And under that ruse, she was able to lure in 3 innocent victims. In 1939, World War II was beginning, and Leonarda's oldest son was gearing up, ready to go to training, ready to fight for his country. Understanding Leonarda's history, she had a horrifying premonition that she was going to lose her son. She believed that he was going to die fighting in the war, and she was willing to do anything to stop that from happening. She had been reading some occult books, and within one of these books, she read about human sacrifices, a life for a life. And upon discovering this, she realised that she knew what she needed to do. In December 1939, Faustina Setti, a woman in her 70s, would go to Leonarda looking for help. She was hoping that Leonarda would be able to set her up with someone. She was clocking on now, and she didn't want to die alone and unmarried. Leonarda told her that she actually had the perfect match. There was this rich man in another town who just so happened to be looking for a wife. Leonarda told Faustina that she would arrange for the couple to get together. However, in exchange, she was looking for 30,000 lire, which was the currency at the time. Leonarda also swore Faustina to secrecy, saying that she could not tell a single soul because they would be jealous and they might ruin it for her. And one other strange condition that she had was that Faustina had to write letters. She had to write letters to her family describing her amazing new husband, how happy she was with this new life, things of that nature. However, she had to write the letters before she actually left. These letters would be left with Leonarda, who would then post them out to Faustina's family while Faustina was off living her best life with her new man. On the 17th, Faustina would arrive at Leonarda's home. She was excited and ready to begin this new venture. Leonarda invited her in for a celebratory wine. Unbeknownst to Faustina, however, The drink had been spiked. As the drugs began to take effect and she became confused, not really knowing what she was doing or where she was, she's clutching onto furniture when she looks up and she spots Leonardo with an axe gripped in her hands. Leonardo says, "I'm sorry," before plunging the axe into Faustina's chest. She would go on to dismember Faustina using a bone saw into 9 separate pieces. Some of the limbs she would completely drain the blood from, and using this blood she would bake it in the oven until it completely dried out. She would then grind it down into a flaky or powdery texture, and then she'd mix it with some flour, eggs, sugar, milk, what have you, and baked cakes with it. She would hand these bloody cakes out to her friends, her family, even sending some off to her son who was at training. They were described as being very sweet. The next year, in September of 1940, 55-year-old Francesca Soavi approached Leonardo, hoping that Leonardo would help her find a new job. She had been working as a teacher within a school, however, I think something was going on within the war, maybe the school closed and she didn't have a job anymore, and she wanted a job, so she went to Leonardo for help. And what do you know it, Leonardo had found the perfect job for her. There was a head teacher position within another school in another town, and it was perfect for Francesca. But in order for Leonardo to give her that job, she had the same conditions that she had given Faustina. She wanted a lump sum payment, this entire exchange to be sworn to secrecy, along with the pre-written letters, all things that Francesca agreed to. Just like Faustina, Francesca would be lured inside of Leonardo's home, drugged, murdered, dismembered, and then baked into cakes. And some of her fat that came away while her limbs were being boiled were taken and then used to make bars of soap. Francesca's family did actually start to worry when, after she had left, they hadn't heard from her in a long time, and they went to Leonardo to see if she knew anything or if she had heard from Francesca. Being the talker that she was, Leonardo was able to talk her way out of it. She palmed off Francesca's family, but not before giving them a couple of her homemade soaps for reassurance, and probably under the ruse of a kind gift, the very soaps which contained Francesca's remains. In that very same month, September 1940, Virginia Capioccio, a former opera singer, went to Leonardo looking for help finding work. And by now you can probably imagine what happened. Leonardo said that she had a job for her out in Florence, and Virginia had to agree and follow up on all of the same conditions. She too would be murdered, dismembered, and then have her remains baked into cakes and then turned into bars of soap. After Virginia's murder/disappearance, her family would actually go to the police, and they already had a lead. Virginia was last seen outside of Leonardo's home. She would be taken to the station for questioning, and after some very light probing, she would make a complete confession. She confessed to all 3 of the women. She described in detail exactly what she had done with their remains, and that she had handed them out to the people within her community. It's widely theorized that she only made this confession so quickly because the police started to think that her son may have committed the murders, and she wanted to clear his name. It's widely believed that she actually would have continued and went on to murder another woman, one more victim, one more human sacrifice, in order to protect all 4 of her children. Leonardo Cianciulli would be handed a sentence of 30 years imprisonment after she had to wait around about 6 years for her trial. She would die at age 77 in 1970 while still serving her sentence behind bars. She is well known as being one of Italy's most infamous serial killers.
It was an unusually quiet evening for police in Colombia until a terrifying call came through. A girl screaming, "Come quick," and then the line went dead. It was 1950 in Columbia, Missouri. Janet Chrisman was a lovely 13-year-old girl living in the area with her family. Although she was young, she just seemed much older than her years. She was the eldest of 3 siblings and was just really used to taking the lead and being responsible. She was also super hardworking and was always babysitting for the locals to make extra pocket money. Local families knew she was very responsible, she was very intelligent, so they didn't mind having effectively a child looking after their own children. But one night, everything changed in the most haunting of ways. It was a Saturday night that March, and Janet had planned to babysit for a couple in the area. This was the Ramack family. They had a 3-year-old little son called Gregory, and he was absolutely adorable. That night, the couple were like, would you just mind watching Gregory while we pop out to a party? Turns out Janet was actually saving up some money to buy a nice outfit for an Easter party, so she was like, definitely, like a way to earn more money, absolutely. So she showed up to the family home around 7:30 p.m. The baby was already asleep in bed, so there really wasn't much for her to do apart from chill. That evening, the police were sat in an unusually quiet department. It was pretty stormy outside, so it seemed like everybody was just tucked up at home. It was 10:35 p.m. when all of a sudden a call made them jump out of their skin. The screams that the officer heard on the other end of the line haunted him for his whole life. A young female voice on the phone screaming, "Come quick," and then the line went dead. I had no idea where the call came from. It wasn't sort of these days where you can easily track somebody's location. They didn't know who the caller was or the address. They pretty much had to just sit back and pray that the person would call again, which she never did. Gregory's parents came home at 1:30 in the morning, which, can I just say, is totally inconsiderate. Like, that's not reasonable in the slightest. When a 13-year-old is babysitting, like, what's the problem for just going out for a couple of hours and making sure you're back before 11 at the very latest? When they peered through the door, they realized something was very, very wrong. All they could see was Janet's bare legs sticking out from behind the sofa. She'd been beaten and strangled to death. But it gets worse. Medical examiners could tell she'd been AR'd. The only saving grace was that little Gregory was okay. But understandably, the whole community was terrified. A mystery paedophile, rapist, and murderer was on the loose in their small town. But it wasn't long before rumours spread about who the culprit was. A guy called Robert Mueller was known in the area for being a total creep, like always coming on to ladies, always being so creepy, especially towards young girls. And where was he the night of the murder, you might ask? He was at the same party that the Ramack couple were at, and he mysteriously vanished for a couple of hours during said party. There was definitely motive, means, and opportunity for Robert to have been the killer, but frustratingly, police botched up the whole investigation. Legally, they actually had to let him free, meaning he was never charged with the murder, and nobody ever got brought to justice. Heartbreakingly, Janet ended up being buried in that outfit that she'd been saving up for.
He murdered his partner in a jealous rage over Grindr messages. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Jason Brockbanks. In 2022, 24-year-old Jason Brockbanks was a third-year student at Northumbria University, where he was described as a promising student. He was originally from Whitehaven in Cumbria, and he moved to Newcastle because he loved the different sights, the scenery, the lifestyle, and just the vibe in general. And I've got to agree, Newcastle is the best city in the UK. In June of 2022, Jason met Aaron Ray. Aaron was from Sunderland, but he was also a student at the university. Only he wasn't, because he ended up dropping out because he didn't like how it was all online learning. This being like COVID times. Aaron wanted to have an exclusive relationship with Jason, but that wasn't something that Jason wanted, and despite expressing this to Aaron, Aaron still thought that they were a couple and in a relationship. He would be described by some of his previous boyfriends as being very jealous and possessive. He was violent, short-tempered, and these traits would only amplify when he was drunk. On the 23rd of September 2022, Aaron visited Jason at his student accommodation on Howard Street at around about 10 p.m. The men were getting sorted for a night out in Newcastle, and so Aaron had went there to have a couple of pre-drinks. Once in Newcastle, they went on a little bar crawl, going to all of the gay bars before eventually ending their night in Powerhouse. Aaron and Jason left Powerhouse at around about 3:15 a.m, and during their walk back to Jason's student accommodation, something happened. On the CCTV footage of them leaving Powerhouse, they seemed to be in good spirits. They were caught lovingly holding hands. Yet, by the time they reached the accommodation, CCTV footage there would capture Aaron kicking Jason and then storming into the building, flinging the door open behind him. He was very clearly fuming about something. Once back inside of his flat, Jason stripped down to his boxers and then climbed into bed, ready to call it a night. It's believed that this was around about 4:11 a.m. a.m. as that's when his WhatsApp said that he was last active. As Jason is lay asleep on his bed, Aaron scooped up his phone and creeped into the ensuite, ready to comb through it. It was during this sneaky search that he found the Grindr app. Grindr is a dating/hookup app mainly for gay, bi, trans men. And I believe that it is an app simply for hookups. It's not like a dating app like Tinder, although I could be completely wrong. So Aaron would find this app and he clicked on it and started going through all the messages, and he would see that Jason had been messaging with other men expressing his interest in getting with them. And this infuriated Aaron, who again believed that he was in a committed relationship with Jason, even though Jason said that that wasn't what he wanted. Aaron was very possessive over Jason, and upon seeing these messages, he felt like Jason was cheating on him, being sly behind his back. Burning with fury and jealousy, Aaron left Jason's flat and walked through to the communal kitchen, where he picked up a kitchen knife. He returns to the room and then looks down to Jason, who is sleeping and defenseless, lay on his side, and he raises the knife in the air and plunges it down into Jason's side, stabbing him 10 centimeters deep. He would also slash Jason in the back at least 2 times. Following this attack, Aaron then washed the bloody knife and returned it back to the communal kitchen. CCTV captures him leaving the accommodation at 4:29 a.m, only 18 minutes after Jason was last active on WhatsApp. He would go back to his home in Sunderland, where he would text message one of his friends saying, quote, "I'm in trouble." It would be 3 days later that Jason's body would be discovered. After his parents back in Cumbria weren't able to get in touch with him for several days, they emailed the manager of the student accommodation because they were incredibly worried. She made her way up to Jason's flat, where she knocked on the door, but got no answer. She repeatedly tried this, and when Jason from inside still wasn't answering, she pulled out her master key and unlocked the door, making her way inside. The first thing that she would see was a bloody palm print on the bathroom door. She would discover the body of 24-year-old Jason Brockbanks slumped in the shower. After being stabbed by Aaron, he had actually managed to get himself out of bed, and it's believed that he was looking for his phone so he could call for help, but he couldn't find it because Aaron had moved it when he had been looking through his messages. Aaron Ray would be arrested on the 29th of September 2022. CCTV footage showing police everything they needed to see. Initially, he tried to spin a tale that Jason had attacked him and that he had only stabbed him out of self-defense. However, it was quite clearly seen that he had gone out of his way to retrieve the knife, and if it was true that Jason had attacked him, instead of going and picking up a knife, why didn't he just leave the accommodation? His story did not add up. After a 7-day trial at Newcastle Crown Court, 21-year-old Aaron Ray would be found guilty of the murder of Jason Brockbanks. He was handed a sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum of 22 years to serve.
Imagine chilling at home when a woman covered in blood runs up to your front door banging and screaming. It was March 2018 near Eau Claire in Wisconsin. A dairy farmer was just minding his own business at his house when a screaming woman with no shoes on started pounding on his front door. She was screaming at the top of her lungs. She was covered in blood, covered in mud. It was honestly the most bizarre sight to see. But actually, after speaking to her, he was left with more questions than answers because she didn't really seem to be able to remember much. Not even her own name. All she said is that she knew that she had been attacked. So he immediately called 911 like, I need professionals here to help me deal with this, and this woman clearly needs medical help. But the police and the medical professionals struggled to get much sense out of her either. All she kept saying was that she remembered there was a guy called Alex Woodworth that she was scared of, and she kept mentioning a guy Jason, asking to see this Jason. Officers were baffled, but they knew that she needed medical attention, so they sent her to the hospital. And they obviously had this one full name to go off, Alex Woodworth. They were like, we need to find this guy, maybe he's dangerous if he's attacked this woman. They had no idea what they were about to find. So they searched all around this dairy farm looking for any clues as to where this woman even came from. Suddenly they could see footprints in the mud, so they followed the footprints and found something that stunned them into silence. A man's body hanging out of the back of a car on a dirt road. He was very clearly dead and very clearly had been stabbed. It was Alex Woodworth. And when I say stabbed, I mean this was a vicious attack. He had 16 stab wounds all over his body. That's when it dawned on the officers, maybe the blood on this woman wasn't her own blood. Maybe it was someone else's. Now it turned out she was 20-year-old Ezra McCandless, and the mystery Jason was a guy called Jason Mengel, who was able to kind of fill in some of the gaps for police. Turns out the police had actually already had an interaction with these people earlier that day. Ezra and Jason had previously been boyfriend and girlfriend, but for whatever reason decided to call their relationship quits and just be friends instead. So Ezra then met this guy, Alex Woodworth, and started hanging out with him and Jason, and they kind of became like a trio in a way. But the problem was Alex and Ezra started dating in secret behind Jason's back. And it was a secret until Jason found out, and he was raging about this. He was like, how could you guys lie to me? So he was like, screw you guys, I'm not going to be friends with you anymore. Well, at that point, Ezra felt awful and decided she wants the forbidden fruit, the guy that she actually doesn't have a chance with anymore. She wants to get back with Jason. So she sacked off Alex and started just relentlessly groveling to this Jason guy. But he was not interested. He was like, no, I don't trust you. You've lied to me, so we're done. I'm not getting back with you. And it gets even more messy because there was another reason Jason didn't want to get back with her, because she'd also got with one of his other friends. It was honestly crazy, but for some reason she was just determined to get Jason back, and she would go to any lengths. She was about to concoct a plan so sickening it defies belief. On the 22nd of March, Jason was just chilling at the local coffee shop when Ezra just happened to walk in and mentioned to him, oh, hey, I'm about to collect some stuff from Alex's house. But she was acting so weird, not like herself, really agitated, that Jason just got a bad feeling about it. So he decided, I'm going to follow her and see if she really does go to Alex's house. After following her on his bike, he pulled up outside Alex's house and saw, sure enough, Ezra's car. He kind of hung around outside to see, like, what's the vibe? Is everything okay? Is she okay? Because she's acting really weird. He was almost like trying to get a little bit of a peep through the window. But turns out somebody spotted him kind of peeping through this window, thought he looked really dodgy, and called police on him. He was a bit embarrassed that he'd been caught, but he explained to police, like, look, I'm just here because I'm concerned. Like, I'm not sure what's going on with her. She just is acting very, very agitated today. So police were happy with that, and they both drove off. They had no idea what was about to happen. So fast forward to in the hospital when police confronted Ezra and said, we found Alex dead. She suddenly could now miraculously remember exactly what happened. It went from, I've got no memory, I don't know, I was attacked, to he tried to stab me and I had to stab him back in self-defense. But none of her story added up, and one massive issue for Ezra's story is that the knife that was used in the stabbing, in the murder, actually came from her dad, pretty much proving that she'd actually bought it there to the crime scene herself. A doctor was also like, yeah, Ezra's wounds are totally superficial and they're all self-inflicted. She was found guilty and given life in prison. And the most popular theory is that she'd concocted this whole thing to look like a victim, make Alex look like the bad guy, and get Jason back.
This brother and sister are the youngest children to be convicted for first-degree murder in the United States. The story of Catherine and Curtis Jones is very controversial and heartbreaking all around. Catherine is the older sister, and her brother Curtis was born only a year later. Their father was very abusive towards their mother. It was very violent, very terrible. When their mother was pregnant with Catherine, their father's abuse was so bad it actually led to their mother's uterus tearing and Catherine having to be born prematurely. When Catherine and Curtis were only toddlers, their mom left their father, so she was luckily able to flee her abuser, but she had to abandon her two children in the process, so she left them with this abusive man. And afterwards, a male relative of their father moved in with them, and this relative began to essay 5-year-old Catherine nearly every day for years. When she tried to tell her father of the abuse, he said he didn't believe her, but her younger brother Curtis told Catherine that he believed her because he was also being abused by this relative. Over the next handful of years, CPS would be called at least 3 times to investigate the accusations that the Jones siblings were being physically abused as well as being essayed, and every single time their father pretty much defended his relative and claimed that his 2 children were liars. Even after the CPS agents uncovered that this unnamed male relative had a history of essaying children, he was a registered essay offender and previously was even accused of essaying his girlfriend's daughter when he was living with her, the father still would defend him, and every single time the CPS investigations were dropped. The system that is meant to protect children has failed Catherine and Curtis time and time again, and their own father and mother have failed them as well. By 1999, 3 adults were living with the Jones siblings, their monster relative, their father, and their father's 29-year-old girlfriend named Sonia Spites, who allegedly also saw the abuse but did nothing. In 1999, Catherine was 13 years old and Curtis was 12 years old, and they've been abused by their relative since they were 4 and 5 years old. They were at their breaking point. Catherine told her younger brother that she wanted to kill all the adults that were hurting them and letting this abuse to go on, as well as, of course, kill their abuser. And for whatever reason, they decided to go after their father's girlfriend first. On January 6, 1999, 13-year-old Catherine and 12-year-old Curtis went and grabbed their father's weapon, while their father's girlfriend Sonia sat and did a puzzle at the kitchen table. They both opened fire on her, and at one point Sonia actually tried to get up and grab the phone for help, but Catherine took it away from her. And once their father's girlfriend was dead, both the children began to panic because now this was real. Catherine tried to clean both their fingerprints off of the weapon, and then she called 911 to report that there was an accident, and then both children fled the home. Catherine and Curtis were caught and arrested early the next morning, and they were arrested on charges of first-degree murder, and they were going to be tried as adults, making them the youngest children to be tried as adults for first-degree murder in the United States. Once they were arrested, both siblings tried to take full responsibility and claimed that the other one had no involvement. They were trying to protect each other. 13-year-old Catherine was even offered a plea deal to testify against her younger brother, but she refused. Ultimately, both Catherine and Curtis were sentenced to 18 years in an adult prison. And then after their release, they would be on probation for the rest of their lives. And they're 12 and 13 years old and going to adult prison. Both of them said that they felt safer in prison than back home with their abuser. Due to Catherine's young age, the adult female prison that she was being sent to was worried about her safety, so they forced Catherine, at 13 years old, to spend the first 3 years of her sentence in solitary confinement, which is seen as like torture to full-grown, fully formed adults. And that's how she spent 13 to 16 years old, completely alone in dark, solitary confinement. And public opinion on the Jones siblings were completely split. There were people in 1999 that saw these children as cold-blooded monsters, and then there were other people that saw them as traumatized children that the system completely failed. And that it was very unfair that these children were being tried and sentenced as adults, having to spend their sentences in adult prison. And there's a lot of people that believe that it possibly would have gone a little bit different if they had been white. In 2016, Catherine was released from prison at age 30. She is now married, she's a mom herself, and she's a huge advocate and voice for victims and for fair sentencing for juvenile offenders. And her younger brother, Curtis, was released the following year, also at age 30, and he is now an ordained minister. So it seems like both of them have been rehabilitated and are trying to live better lives. We've talked about child killers before, and it's always an interesting conversation in the comments about if you think child killers can be rehabilitated. Do you think that juveniles should ever be tried and sentenced as adults, or is it a case-by-case basis? Let me know all your thoughts on this in the comments. Let me know what case you want to see me cover next, and I will see you guys next time.
When this man turned up at a police station, officers had no idea that he was about to confess to one of the most gruesome, heinous cases that Portsmouth has ever seen. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the case of David Guy. On the 3rd of July 2012, a group of students were taking an evening walk along a beach in Southsea, Hampshire, when they noticed something that looked out of place. On the rocks of the beach, there was a black bin bag, and inside the black bin bag, there was something wrapped up in a pink shower curtain. Curiosity getting the better of one of the students, they pulled back the shower curtain, discovering a dismembered human torso. The police were quickly called, and over the next couple of days, they were able to recover a pair of human legs and a pelvis on separate parts of the beach. The limbs were identified as belonging to 30-year-old David Guy, who was a local man to Southsea. I couldn't find exactly how they were able to make this determination about his identity, but an educated guess would say that it was through DNA. The pathologist who examined David's remains couldn't say for certainty what caused his death. The pathologist didn't have many body parts to actually examine. However, the injuries that were inflicted on the torso gave him a pretty good idea. In the region of where your heart would be, there was a gaping wound, and this led the pathologist to believe that David was likely stabbed with a long, sharp blade directly into his heart, which would have killed him instantly. During his autopsy, it was also discovered that some of David's internal organs were missing. Apart from his torso, legs and pelvis, none of David's other remains have ever been found, and this includes his head, his arms and his genitals. Police began to look into David to see who he was, who he hung around with, who was involved in his life, and this is how they came across 46-year-old David Hilder. The two men had been friends for absolutely years, Hilder being known as Big Dave and Guy being known as Little Dave. But their friendship was a very toxic and violent one. Hilder was very much the dominant one out of the two, and he would often belittle or beat or put down Guy. Hilder would allow Guy to come to his flat on Richmond Road to take a shower, have a wash or take a bath. Guy lived in a camper van nearby, but I don't know what his access to water was like if he had to go to Hilder's flat to use his shower, and Hilder would also provide Guy with food. So as you can imagine, Guy was very reliant on Hilder. In exchange for this, Hilder would ask Guy to keep his flat clean and to cat sit his beloved pet Tinker. One day between the 30th of June and the 3rd of July, it's believed that Hilder arrived back to his flat and found it in disarray, that it was completely upside down, and that his cat Tinker had been neglected. Guy hadn't been looking after her. Allegedly, this is when Hilder, in a fit of rage, furious at Guy, took a large sharp knife and stabbed Guy straight through the heart. A man who he had been best friends with for years. He would go on to dismember Guy, and he would use his bike, which had a box fitted on the front of it, to dispose of Guy's remains wherever he disposed of them. We know that his torso, legs and pelvis ended up on that beach, but where everything else is still a mystery to this day. On the 5th of July, a very visibly dishevelled Hilder arrived to Shoreham police station, which was around about 45 miles away from where Guy's torso was discovered. The police station was actually closed, so Hilder used a free phone to contact the police. He seemed very confused and agitated and told the operator, quote, "I would like to speak to someone. I think I have done something serious. This morning I found a lot of empty Nurofen wrappers in my pocket." When asked if he needed an ambulance, he responded, quote, "I need to speak to a copper first. I think I have killed someone." A police officer would be dispatched to the station and took Hilder inside of the police station to be questioned, and Hilder went with him, no bother. He was described as being very confused. He kept on rambling about something that he had done and that what he did was terrible, but he just couldn't remember what it was. It was just at the back of his mind. After telling the police officer that he think he might have overdosed on the Nurofen that he had taken, he was taken to the hospital to be
be examined. Meanwhile, police were dispatched to his flat on Richmond Road and went in for a little look around, and nothing stood out to them. Nothing seemed out of place, nothing caused any suspicion, there was no sign of a struggle, nothing like that. It just looked like a regular flat. When Hilda was told this, that police had been to his flat and everything seemed fine, it was said that you could just see the relief that came over him. And Hilda said that this horrible thing that he felt like he had done must have just been in his head. He would be discharged from the hospital and made his way back to Portsmouth. Despite Hilda's flat looking very ordinary and not suspicious, something did stick out to one investigator, and that was Tinker the cat. On the shower curtain that guy's torso was wrapped up in, they were able to extract 8 cat hairs. These were sent off to a university who were doing some type of research that I'm not going to get into, but they were able to determine that this cat hair had a 1 in 100 chance of belonging to another cat than it did to Tinker. Not to get into it too much, but cat DNA is obviously very different to human DNA, so for the investigators, they were very confident with this 1 in 100 number. They were very confident that the hairs that were found on the shower curtain belonged to Tinker. When they arrived back at Hilda's flat and did a more thorough investigation, they would find fibres that matched the fibres from the shower curtain, and they would also find traces of Guy's blood. David Hilda would be arrested on suspicion of the murder of David Guy. At trial, he would be acquitted of the murder charge and instead was convicted of manslaughter. He was handed a sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum of 12 years to serve, meaning that if he isn't out already, he could be out any day now.
Mac Miller lived a very, very short 26 years of life, and I think I just want to talk about this because the way that he passed, unfortunately, is not uncommon. And although it is overwhelmingly sad, I think it's so important to talk about so people know that this happens, that it's real, and that it can happen to anyone within seconds. According to witness statements, Mac Miller was last seen by his assistant on September 6th of 2018 at around 10:30 p.m. The following morning, September 7th at 11:41 a.m., his assistant called 911 after finding Mac Miller unresponsive in his bedroom at his house in California. He was pronounced deceased at the scene only 10 minutes after that 911 call. He was only 26 years old. Days prior, on September 4th of 2018, at approximately 11:07 p.m., 61 hours before he passed, he exchanged text messages with Cameron Pettit. Mac texting, "Yo," Cameron texting, "Yo, what's up?" Mac asked him about a specific substance, to which Cameron said he didn't have because he couldn't find any. Mac says, "All good," and then he asks about a different one. They go back and forth until Cameron brings up a different one, and he says, "I could get yellow and blues though." Mac says, "When can you get them?" Cameron says, "Probably in an hour or two. They are 30 each." Mac asks about 3 different kinds, and Cameron says he'll go pick them up and then take them to Mac at the studio that he was at. Cameron said he would be there at around 1 a.m. 1 hour passes, and at 12:56 p.m., Mac texts Cameron saying, "Yo, yo." 8 minutes later, he says, "Where are you at?" Then he texts him a question mark, but Cameron does not respond. A few minutes pass before Mac texts Mia Johansson at 1:12 in the morning saying, "Cameron is supposed to be pulling up, but he isn't answering." Mia says, "I don't know, hon." Mac asks if there's anyone else that could take the substances to him instead, and Mia says that she could send them with a girl. Mac says, "I need a few things," and Mia says, "I have everything, lol." They exchange messages from approximately 1:12 in the morning to 1:47 a.m. until they agree to send a girl with the stuff to meet Mac at the studio for a total of just over $1,000. Mia tells him that the girl was on her way and that she was 31 minutes away. Then at 2:02 in the morning, when the girl is already on her way, Cameron texts back saying, "Sorry, I got sidetracked, coming now." Mac says, "For sure." Cameron gets there at like 2:25 in the morning, and it's believed that the girl that Mia sent got there shortly after at like 2:30 a.m. So Mac got deliveries from both Cameron and the girl that Mia sent. Based on text messages, it sounds like the girl that was referred to as Carla was at the studio with Mac throughout the night and into the next morning until approximately 7 a.m. on September 5th. A day and a half later, Mac Miller was found by his assistant. His assistant typically woke him up at around 11:30 a.m. When he went to go wake him up that morning, he found him unresponsive. He gave him CPR until paramedics arrived, but it was too late. It was devastating, as you can imagine. The 911 call in itself is heartbreaking, and of course, Mac Miller's passing broke so many people's hearts. His cause of death was from mixing too many substances, and the manner of death was ruled as an accident. When the news broke that same day, Cameron reached out to a friend on Instagram when he was realizing that he was potentially about to be in a lot of trouble, saying hi. The person asked how he was doing. Cameron said, "Not great." The person said, "You're just paranoid. Nothing has happened yet." Cameron then says, "I'm gonna go off the grid, move to another country. What should my name be?" It didn't take long for authorities to identify Cameron, Mia, and Carla, but they needed to figure out who the person was that sold them and where they came from, because some of the things that were sold to Mac were fake. He purchased purchased what he thought was real, but he was sold fake substances that contained something else that they were not supposed to. And that something else was the reason why he passed. According to federal prosecutors, Mac had no idea about this, and it was ruled that he would not have passed if it wasn't for the contained in them. Authorities figured out that they came from Cameron, who purchased them from a 46-year-old man called Stephen Walter, and from Stephen they went to a man called Ryan, who then delivered them to Cameron. Stephen Walker had a lengthy criminal background, and the guy Ryan conveniently moved to Arizona very soon after Mac passed away. Some reports state that it was unclear if Cameron knew that what he's selling was fake, but text messages between him and Stephen definitely make it sound like they knew what they were doing. And worth it to note that less than 1 month after Mac Miller passed away, Cameron repurchased more of the same thing from Stephen and kept selling them throughout the following 10 months. An attorney later came out and said that the men allegedly continued selling what they were selling after Mac's passing with full knowledge of the risks their products posed to human life. Ultimately, 28-year-old Cameron Pettit, 46-year-old Stephen Walter, and 36-year-old Ryan Rebus were all arrested in September of 2019. They were facing 20 years to life in federal prison. Stephen was sentenced to 17 and a half years, Ryan was sentenced to 10 years, and Cameron served an unknown sentence and was released from prison on October 11th of 2024. I literally cannot even put into words to you guys how important it is to be safe and aware. The people that sell this stuff, they don't care about you. They're going to keep selling it over and over again, and they are the worst people in the world. I just literally do not know how these people that know they're selling this and know that people are passing away from it, I don't know how they sleep at night. But apart from that, mental health. If you guys are struggling, please reach out to friends and family members that care about you. It breaks my heart how often this happens. I literally can't say it without crying. When Mac Miller passed away, Ariana Grande called him 928 times. And it only feels right to end this video with what she wrote about him in 2019. I adored you from the day that I met you when I was 19, and I always will. I can't believe you aren't here anymore. I really can't wrap my head around it. We talked about this so many times. I'm so mad. I'm so sad. I don't know what to do. You were my dearest friend for so long, above anything else. I'm so sorry I couldn't fix or take your pain away. I really wanted to. The kindest, sweetest soul with demons he never reserved. I hope you're okay now. Rest. I just thought it was important to talk about this because it literally happens way too often. But I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, stay safe, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
This teen mom gives birth in secret and then she throws her baby in the dumpster. So the girl behind it all is this high school junior named Alexis Avila. She's 17, living in New Mexico, and she's about to make one of the darkest choices I've ever talked about. So one day, Alexis and her 16-year-old boyfriend Steven decide to try out this TikTok trend. You know, the one where you take a pregnancy test just for fun? And surprise, surprise, it comes back positive. So now they're staring at each other like, what do we do now? Obviously the right thing would be to tell their parents, but no, they're too scared. So instead they decide, let's just ignore it. Like the problem's gonna magically disappear on its own. I guess they really didn't pay attention during the birds and the bees talk, because that is not how babies work. They tell themselves, look, we'll just wait for the perfect moment to tell our parents. But that perfect moment never comes. And so in the meantime, Alexis starts hiding the whole pregnancy thing from her parents. She starts getting stomach cramps, back pain, missing school, missing work. And when her parents ask what's wrong, she just shrugs it off and says, oh, it's just stomach cramps, I'm fine. And they believe her. At some point, Alexis and Steven get into this huge fight. And I don't know exactly what it was about, but things get so heated that Alexis's mom actually decided to call the cops on Steven. And my guess is, because of that fight, Alexis decides to break up with him. And when Steven asks about the baby, because remember, he still thinks she's pregnant, Alexis decides to make up this big lie and says that she had a miscarriage. And I'm sitting here like, Alexis, what is your plan here? Like, you do realize you're gonna have to give birth sooner or later, right? But anyways, now Steven thinks that this whole nightmare is over. Like, he doesn't have to stress about how he's gonna tell his family that at 16 he got a girl pregnant. So months keep passing, she eventually turns 18, and Alexis decides she's gonna keep pushing through with this lie. And then one day, on January 7th, 2022, something happens to her that she can't just ignore. Alexis wakes up in excruciating pain. She's clutching onto her stomach, she can barely barely breathe and she runs to the bathroom. And that's when she realizes she's in labor. But instead of screaming for help, instead of waking up her parents, she locks the door and decides she's going to do this alone. And I can only imagine she's in that bathroom in so much pain, just crying, sweating, trying to keep herself quiet so that way nobody can hear her. And after hours of this, she actually manages to give birth to a baby boy. Now this is the part where any sane person would grab the phone and call 911. But Alexis, she looks down at this newborn baby in her arms and decides she's not keeping him. So she wraps him in a towel, shoves him in the backseat of her car, and drives far, far away from her home. She pulls up to the back of this department store. She gets out the car, grabs a garbage bag, and puts the baby inside and just tosses him into the dumpster like he's trash. Mind you, he is still alive and crying at this point. And then she hops back into her car and just drives off like nothing happened. About 6 hours go by and I would hope that she came back, but no. The baby is still in that dumpster, still alive and crying. And then, by some miracle, 3 friends who planned on going dumpster diving show up. So they're digging through the trash, hoping to find some expensive items, maybe to resell. But while they're looking through the bags of trash, they hear this kind of faint whining sound. At first they think it's an animal, maybe a puppy stuck in a bag. So they start ripping bags open, following the sound, until finally they find this one bag that's tied up really tightly. They tear it open, but the second they do, they stop. They're immediately like, what the hell? Because inside was the newborn baby boy that Alexis threw away. Like, how can you actually be so evil? He is freezing, he's barely alive, trying to cry, gasping for air, and they're just in total shock. So one of them, without even hesitating, scoops him up and holds him against their chest to keep him warm. Within minutes, paramedics arrive to the scene. They rush the baby to the hospital, and somehow, against every single odd, he survived. Like, if those 3 didn't show up when they did, that baby would have been gone. So now that police know he is okay, they decide to check the back of the department store cameras to see who could have done something this inhumane. And not only do they see Alexis throwing her newborn in a dumpster, they also see her license plate. And to make things worse for her, when police check the bag, they find a whole bunch of items that literally say her name on it. So by that point, she's kind of screwed. Police quickly track down the car's license plate, and late at night they go to her house and knock. Her mom and dad open the door and they are confused because everyone knows police don't just show up to your house to chit chat. So her parents naturally have their guard up and they're like, what's going on? And that's when police straight up tells them, we are investigating your daughter Alexis for abandoning her newborn in a dumpster. Her parents are shocked. They're like, no, you must have the wrong person. Our daughter is not pregnant. But the cops did in fact come with receipts, and they showed them the video of Alexis in her car. At that point, there's no defending it, so they go inside the house and they wake up Alexis, who is sleeping. Like, how do you sleep after that? She's brought to the police station for questioning and basically tries to lie her way out of it. She starts crying and saying, I just found out I was pregnant yesterday, and that when she suddenly gave birth, she didn't know what to do. She's just a baby and panicked. Girl, we all know how that baby got there. You're grown, so act like it. But her lie did not hold long because they talked to Steven, and he tells them everything. How he truly believed that she had a miscarriage and that she knew from the start. And with all of that, Alexis was immediately arrested, and in 2023 she was charged with attempted and abuse. But you guys, she had the nerve to plead not guilty. Obviously they didn't buy her sob story and she got sentenced to 16 years. But here's the part that really pisses me off. 6 months later, half a year, Alexis gets released from prison.
What the fuck?
Why? Because her lawyer said she didn't get a fair trial. Please tell me why the court actually bought into that BS. So just like that, Alexis walks out of prison free while waiting for another trial. And now, fast forward like 2 years, it's 2025, and Shorty is still free. So she did what she did and only served 6 months in prison for it? That isn't even as long as a full-term pregnancy. Please tell me you're just as mad as I am. But let's end on a good note. The baby did make a full recovery, you guys. And Steven, his biological father, takes him in and names him Saul. I am genuinely so glad he manned up, unlike you know who. Anyways, important note, ladies, if you get pregnant, please talk to somebody. I'm being serious. Do not, and I repeat, do not pull an Alexis or Alexi. We've been here before. I love you guys. Mwah. Group hug.
This teacher essayed multiple of her students until she got pregnant. For a while, Rebecca Joins from the UK was living like her best life. She graduated university, got this really nice apartment with a long-term boyfriend. The two had actually been together since she was 15, and for a while, they had the perfect relationship. Rebecca had also recently gotten her dream job as a high school math teacher, so things were looking really good. But after 9 years of dating her long-term boyfriend, Rebecca became really controlling, possessive, and jealous. She was always accusing her boyfriend of cheating, and after a while, he broke up with her and moved out, which was really devastating for Rebecca. And pretty much right when that happened, the 2020 lockdown started, so classes were moved online and Rebecca was completely alone. But in September of 2021, Rebecca was 27 years old and that school year started with classes back in school. Rebecca was teaching math to 14 and 15-year-olds, and she's a younger teacher, and I guess some people would find her attractive, and she started getting a lot of attention from her students, these teenage boys. These 14 and 15-year-old boys were constantly flirting with Rebecca, and she was lonely and single, so the 27-year-old Rebecca really liked the attention. But instead of being the responsible teacher, like the adult in this situation, Rebecca really entertained this inappropriate behavior. And there was this one 15-year-old boy in particular that was especially flirty towards Rebecca, and all the victims in this case identities have been protected, so we're just gonna refer to him as Boy A. And after only being his teacher for 5 weeks, Rebecca gave Boy A her phone number. That was on October 11th, which was a Monday. The two were constantly flirting through text. It was really suggestive. And by that Friday, so only 5 days later, 27-year-old Rebecca and 15-year-old Boy A went on their first date. Boy A told his mom that he was going to be spending the night at his friend's house, and him and Rebecca went to the mall for their first date. At the mall, Rebecca bought Boy A 345-pound Gucci belt, which is like $440 in the United States, and buying victims really expensive gifts is a tactic that predators often use. After the mall, Rebecca and Boy A went back to Rebecca's apartment, and on the way, the two of them actually joked about how Boy A wasn't even old enough to drive yet. Like, yuck. Back at the apartment, Rebecca statutory SA'd Boy A multiple times. She actually lied to him and said that she was infertile and couldn't get pregnant, so the two of them didn't use protection. And this is just so wrong and illegal on so many levels. The age of consent is 18. Rebecca is Boy A's teacher. She's only known him for a couple of weeks, and this was Boy A's first time ever. And like teenage boys do, over that weekend, Boy A told all of his friends about what he did with Miss Joins. So by Monday, rumors had spread across the entire school, which of course were not rumors, and very quickly, CPS, the police, and the school were all notified. Boy A confessed to everything, and he said it honestly made him really, really uncomfortable, but he was trying to act like he was cool and mature, but he's only 15. Rebecca was arrested. She was suspended as her position as a teacher. She was let out on bail pending an investigation and a trial, with the condition that she was not allowed to have any contact with anyone under the age of 18. Unfortunately, Boy A is not the only victim in this case. So now we have to talk about Boy B. Boy B was another 15-year-old boy in Rebecca's math class, and before being arrested, Rebecca added Boy B on Snap. And while she was out on bail for the same crime, Rebecca was sending flirty and suggestive messages to Boy B, as well as inappropriate photos. And by the beginning of November, Rebecca invited Boy B over to her apartment for the first time. This is her second victim in less than 1 month, and she's already gotten caught once. First time that Boy B came over, Rebecca did assault him, but they didn't go all the way because Rebecca wanted to wait until Boy B turned 16, which was only a couple weeks away, but like that would make it any better. And as soon as he turned 16, Rebecca statutory SA'd Boy B, and this was also his first time ever, and the two would then be in a relationship for over a year. Just like with her ex-boyfriend, Rebecca became super obsessive and controlling and possessive and jealous over Boy B. She wanted all of his passwords. She would always go through his phone. She would make Boy B FaceTime her to prove that he wasn't with other girls. She also wanted Boy B's location, and if he wouldn't text her back fast enough, Rebecca would just show up to wherever he was. So now she's stalking this teenage boy. And when Boy B tried to break up with Rebecca, she threatened to unalive herself, which is like another tactic that abusers and manipulators use. But Rebecca is 28 years old now. She's almost 30, and this is what she's doing to a teenager. And then in March of 2023, story, Rebecca had been abusing boy B for 18 months. She told him to come over to her apartment because she had a surprise for him. When he came over, she had a scavenger hunt set up for him all throughout her apartment, which ended with boy B finding a baby onesie that said, "I love you, daddy" on it. And this is so confusing because did she forget that he's a teenage boy? Like, this is something you would do if you and your husband had been trying for a baby for a while. And also, Rebecca had also told boy B that she was infertile and couldn't get pregnant, which obviously wasn't true, but then they never used any protection. It's like this was something she planned so she could trap this teenage boy. But luckily, I think this was enough for boy B to realize that he was so over his head that he went home and he told his parents everything, which I'm sure was really, really difficult for him to do. I mean, he's a teenage boy. He has to say that he's been sleeping with his adult teacher and now he's gotten her pregnant. So I really, really applaud his bravery for feeling like he can go to his parents. But Rebecca was arrested again. And in January of 2024, she gave birth in prison to boy B's baby, and boy B and his family have full custody of that baby. Rebecca's trial began in May of 2024, and she really tried to act like she was the victim. Every single day into court, she would bring this like little baby hat. You can see in this photo, she has it tucked into her pants for some reason. And sadly, some people don't see men as victims, especially of SA, even if they're teenagers. So the prosecution asked the jury to imagine how they would feel if this was a male adult teacher on trial and he had SA'd two 15-year-old girls and had gotten one of them pregnant, because there is no difference. Rebecca was found guilty on all charges, but sadly, she was only sentenced to 6.5 years in prison, meaning she'll get out of prison by the time she's in her mid-30s. And I truly think that Rebecca is a dangerous predator and will likely reoffend. And also, when Rebecca is released from prison, she will get visitation of boy B's baby, which I don't agree with at all. I definitely think if she was a man and the roles were reversed, that would not be the case. But luckily, when Rebecca is released from prison, she will be on the registered SA offender list for the rest of her life. And if you watched to the end of this video, thank you so much. It would mean so much to me if you shared this video. I don't want Rebecca to get out of prison thinking that she can just live her life as normal. I want as many people as possible to know this monster's face.
If you saw this TikTok, you'd probably think, okay, yeah, normal video, nothing stands out about it. But then you learn the backstory behind it and what's happening in just the other room as this girl is deciding to record this TikTok. And it's evil. There's no other word for it. It's literally vile, pure evil. Nicola Priest was a teenager living in the UK with her mom's sister and her stepdad. They were living just outside of Birmingham. And she was living a life of a typical girl her age. She was posting on social media, doing her makeup, going out with her friends. She had an active TikTok profile where she would post videos of herself dancing, makeup tutorials, just little clips of her everyday life. But her entire world changed when she found out that she was pregnant at 17 years old. Nicola gave birth to a baby girl in 2017 and she named her Kaylee Jade Priest. The father was not in the picture, so of course the baby lived in the same house as Nicola and her family, and Kaylee was the cutest little girl. Anyone who met her outside of the family would tell you that she was just the sweetest little girl. On social media, specifically on TikTok, Nicola began posting videos of her daughter. The two of them would do dances together, they would play, they would hang out, and if you watched the videos, you would probably think, oh, cute, mother, daughter, so sweet. Wrong. Nicola was the worst mom because she could not have cared any less about her daughter if she tried. Nicola never bathed her, fed her, changed her diapers, and didn't play with her. She honestly hardly even talked to her, and when she did spend time with her, it was only because she had to. Luckily for baby Kaylee, Nicola's mom and sister stepped up to take care of her. They did absolutely everything in their power to raise her and care for her and give her everything that a baby needs. So Kaylee was taken care of, but not by Nicola in the slightest. When Nicola had her, she pretty much just completely disregarded her, or she was yelling at her or punishing her, all while making two other things her priorities: social media and boys. Nicola was also not a great daughter. She never listened to her mom. She went out, she would leave Kaylee at home, very much so prioritizing hanging out with random boys and doing things that I guess she considered to be fun. By 2019, Nicola fell pregnant again, and she gave birth to now her second child sometime that year. The father was her boyfriend at the time, a guy called Daniel, and Daniel was a good guy. He was excited to become a dad. He loved being able to be in Kaylee's life. He had good intentions, and he definitely cared significantly more for Kaylee than Nicola ever did. At some point throughout their relationship, Nicola ends up getting in a really bad fight with her mom, and I think her sister as well, because they're just trying to tell her to treat Kaylee like a toddler should be treated, but Nicola just refused to listen. She got super defensive. She moved out. She took Kaylee with her and then told her family members, aka mom and sister, that they would never see her again. She moved in with Daniel into his family's house, and the two of them later on got their own apartment. But getting into that fight with her mom and her sister was terrible because they were 2 out of the 3 people who seemed to actually care and love Kaylee. But the third person was Daniel, so there was still a little bit of hope in the air that even though Kaylee sadly would no longer be allowed to see her aunt and her grandma, she still had Daniel and his family. But sadly, that would not last long either. Because being in a relationship with someone like Nicola, who pretty much only cares about herself, wasn't something that Daniel could see for himself long term. As much as he cared for Kaylee, I think he realized that being with Nicola was just too much. I think I said 2019 earlier, but the baby was born in 2020. So after their baby was born in 2020, they broke up, and Daniel did whatever he could to still provide and still be in the baby's life, even when him and Nicola were completely over. He let Nicola and Kaylee stay at the apartment, and he moved back in with his family, but they worked out an agreement in which Daniel would take the baby on the weekends and Nicola would have him on weekdays. But I told you that one of Nicola's biggest priorities was boys, so it didn't take long for her to jump into a new relationship. In 2020, Nicola got into a relationship with Callum Redfern, a 21-year-old guy who she had known for a little bit and one that she was reportedly infatuated with. Callum, not a good guy. He was reckless, he was selfish, had severe anger issues. Also, not on the same page at all as Nicola in regards to their relationship, really. Well, it was very much so a relationship in her eyes. She was very much my man, you are mine, let's be together forever. I will give you whatever you want. And he was very much, a man has needs, you meet my needs, but that's about the only thing that you do for me. So whatever thing they had to him was very much physical versus in Nicola's eyes was very much emotional. But Callum, also great at not caring, so he pretty much just led Nicola on, let her believe whatever she wanted to believe. So their relationship was weird and the opposite of healthy, but it was different in the way that Nicola now not only cared about herself, she actually cared a lot about Callum. Yet that meant that Kaylee, her 3-year-old daughter, got even less attention from her, if that's even possible. Not only did Nicola not care about Kaylee, she often yelled at her, she called her names, she would punish her. I mean, you would think that this 3-year-old little girl was her biggest enemy by the way that she treated her. Add to that, Callum and his selfishness and his anger issues, it was quite the perfect recipe for disaster. Neighbors living below Nicola's apartment at times heard loud noises coming from upstairs, followed by Kaylee crying. On one occasion, a neighbor allegedly heard Kaylee crying, and Nicola say afterwards, quote, "I'll just say that she fell off the bed," end quote. Things in that apartment were bad, much worse than anyone could have ever imagined. Later on, text messages were revealed that showed just how angry Nicola always was at Kaylee, the most innocent little girl who just wanted to be loved and cared for by her own mother. In one exchange, Nicola texted Callum, quote, "I'm gonna her because she keeps leaving the living room or going in the kitchen, so I've hit her and smacked her for going to the bathroom in her nappy," end quote. Callum's response to that was, quote, "Good, give her one from me." Nicola replied to that saying, "I will, babe." Just days after those text messages, the horrible events of today's case would occur. The last full day of Kaylee's life began ordinarily enough. On Saturday, August 8th of 2020, CCTV cameras recorded Nicola and Kaylee leaving their apartment. And as per usual, Nicola seems extremely uninterested in her. Kaylee is looking at her the entire time. Nicola does not look at her once, completely ignoring her. She walks in front of Kaylee, keeping her distance with almost no physical or verbal interaction between the two of them the entire time. When they returned back home, Kaylee appeared well, walking, talking, moving normally. Oh, and also the baby this weekend was with Daniel, so it was only Nicola, Callum, and Kaylee now at their apartment. At around 7 p.m. that night, Kaylee was put to bed. Nicola and Callum were in the living room along with a friend that Callum had over, but like many children her age, Kaylee did not want to go to sleep. She wanted to stay up, she wanted to play, so she began to cry, calling out, wanting to be let out of her room. But Nicola and Callum, they wanted to be intimate with each other right then and there. Why not? Your daughter is literally crying out for you, and there's another person, you have a friend over too, but they started kissing or whatever, but Kaylee was still crying, and they got so incredibly angry and irritated, they both stopped what they were doing. They entered Kaylee's bedroom and they punished her physically without holding back for interrupting them. Afterwards, they leave her in her room. They go back to doing whatever they were doing until they were done, and then Callum, along with his friend, leave the apartment completely. So now it's just Kaylee who's locked in her bedroom and her mom, Nicola. Nicola goes back into Kaylee's room. She sees that she is very clearly, obviously not okay because of everything that they did to her, sees that she is throwing up uncontrollably. 3 years old, by the way, and what does she do? She closes the door and she gets on her phone, completely and absolutely ignoring the horrible state that Kaylee was in. What exactly happened in that apartment has never been fully established because both Nicola and Callum ended up blaming each other entirely, but the injuries that Kaylee sustained tell us enough. Kaylee had catastrophic injuries to her chest and abdomen, a torn intestine, fractured ribs, a fractured sternum, and a deflated lung. Expert witnesses describe the injuries as producing the type of damage usually seen as a result of a high-speed car crash. Other experts later told the court that it was also comparable to injuries that a child might suffer from falling approximately 30 feet onto concrete. That night, those are the injuries that Kaylee had and felt and was going through, left alone in her bedroom, while her mom, 22-year-old Nicola, was in the living room. She was texting Callum that she loved him, that it was so nice to see him, and then, out of boredom, I guess, Nicola picks up her phone and she starts making TikToks. Yep, she props up her phone and she starts doing dances. No care in the world. And then she just goes to her bedroom and eventually falls asleep. Kaylee Jade spent the night in that condition, using every last bit of energy that she had to try and survive. She was alone. She was slowly giving up. Her little body couldn't handle it, and no one called for help. It was not until the following day, August 9th of 2020, at around 11 a.m., Nicola Priest called an ambulance for her daughter. She calls and says that she thinks that her daughter fell and hit her head, that she's not breathing, and that she's turning blue. The operator on the phone tells her to do CPR. She says that she's doing CPR and that it's not working. Later we find out she never tried to do CPR, and Kaylee was already gone by the time the ambulance arrived. There were a total of 68 injuries on her body, most of which were caused that night, but some dated back 2 months earlier. Medical staff was able to determine that because of the way that they looked, meaning that this awful treatment of Kaylee had been going on for weeks, months before that final night. Authorities arrested both Nicola Priest and Callum Redfern, and you will not be shocked to hear that anything and everything Nicola told authorities were lies. She was full of fake stories, attempting to make everything seem like it was an accident, but it was obvious to any person that saw her and spoke to her that she was a mother who did not in the slightest care about her daughter. Callum tried claiming that he wasn't even in the apartment, that he didn't stay the night there that night, and that he knew nothing, which is true, but he was fully responsible as well. Both of them fully denying any responsibility, and eventually both of them fully turning on each other. They must have realized, I guess, that authorities were not buying into their lies, so instead they pointed the finger of blame entirely at each other. When asked how Kaylee's passing had affected him, Callum only responded with, quote, "It's not my child, it's not really affected me," end quote. I'm happy to say that when they did eventually go to trial, the jury wasn't believing anything that they were saying. CCTV footage, witness testimony, text message records, and reports from several medical experts played a crucial role in proving the case. The prosecution's argument was pretty straightforward, that on the night of August 8th, both defendants were alone with Kaylee when she sustained her fatal injuries. Both had the means, the motive, and the opportunity. Both had documented history of this kind of behavior towards her, and neither called for help. On August 5th of 2021, the jury convicted both Nicola Priest and Callum Redfern on the manslaughter of Kaylee Jade Priest. They were found not guilty of murder because of a lack of evidence, because they were unable to determine exactly who did what and what part they played. They were found not guilty of murder, but instead guilty of manslaughter, which is crazy to me, and I'm sure to many of you as well. Nicola was also found guilty of a separate charge relating to Kaylee's older injuries. She was sentenced to only 15 years in prison for manslaughter and 3 years for the second charge, and Callum was sentenced to only 14 years. When Nicola's mom, Kaylee's grandmother, found out, she was absolutely shattered. As you can imagine, she had been the only one, along with Nicola's sister, that ever tried to raise the alarm on how bad, how awful of a mother Nicola was, and they had been the only ones that had loved Kaylee since the moment she was born. This is a statement from her, quote, "I could never stop staring at that smile on her beautiful face. I loved every moment watching her develop to nearly school age. Kaylee Jade deserved to show the world who she could have been and what greatness she could have brought to this world. Nanny will forever hold you in her heart," end quote. Yeah, I really have no words. Also baffled at the sentence that they got. But that is all for me today. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to little Kaylee's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. That's a kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
At one point in time, this woman right here was the most hated woman in America until she disappeared one day along with her son and granddaughter. And it was a really big mystery on what happened to them. And it would eventually take 5 years to find out what happened to this family. This is Madeline Murray O'Hare. Now you're probably wondering, why is she the most hated woman in America? Well, she's a full-blown atheist. And in 1963, she was opposing from prayer being in public schools. and she took it all the way up to the Supreme Court and she won. And she started the American Atheist Association, and also she really was preaching to separate church from state. Madeline was described as being the most bitter, distasteful woman you will ever meet in your life. She would be doing interviews and they would have to stop in the middle of the interview because she would have so much foul language. In 1995, Madeline, her son John, and her granddaughter Robin all left Austin, Texas without saying a word to anybody. They found a note on their office door stating that they were called away on an emergency and they have no idea when they will be back. John's Mercedes is missing, Robin's Porsche is missing, they all left their passports, and Madeline left her diabetes medication, and also she left behind her 3 dogs. Now, even though she despised other human beings, she absolutely adored her dogs. So the president of the organization, Ellen, tried to call John and Madeline. She called John and Madeline answered. And she reassured her, everything is fine, you don't need to worry about us. But then about a month later, they stopped answering calls. So when Ellen was taking over the organization while Madeline was away, she had noticed that there was $600,000 missing from the organization. And no one from the entire organization reported this family missing until a year later when Madeline's estranged son, Bill Murray, came in and reported the family missing. In 1980, Bill had a falling out with his mother because he was no longer an atheist and he turned to Christianity. He even wrote a book and even made a movie attacking his mother's beliefs. His mother completely disowned him and they stopped talking after that. John was the one that withdrew the $600,000 from the account, and he was making a lot of phone calls out of San Antonio to banks, to pharmacies, to airports, and also to jewelry stores. And apparently John had came in and exchanged the $600,000 for $600,000 worth in gold coins. The police were not at all concerned about trying to find this family. They just assumed they took this $600,000 from their organization and just fled somewhere. But there was a news reporter that wanted to get to the bottom of this and find the truth and find Madeline and her family. So they find out that John had sold his Mercedes for only $15,000, which it's worth way more than that, to a man named Mark Sparrow. And they show a picture of John to this man and he said, "That's not the man that sold me the vehicle." So he's looking at mugshots and he does identify this man here, Danny Fry. He's an ex-con, but he has also been reported missing as well. Danny's family had told investigators that he used to work with a man named David Waters, and he used to work for Madeline, but they had a falling out. He was an office manager, and he was caught stealing $50,000 from the organization. So he was arrested on theft, but he agreed to pay the money back, and he served no jail time. And Madeline was absolutely infuriated about this. So Madeline ended up writing an article about David, stating that he was a thief and that he was having homosexual relationships while he was locked up in prison for a previous assault charge. And David was absolutely infuriated about this and wanted to get revenge on the entire family. So he was working with Danny and also a man named Gary Carr. Just a short time later, they end up finding a torso in the Dallas River with the head missing and also the hands missing. So they are trying to figure out who this victim is. It could possibly be John, but it doesn't really match his description. So they're thinking this possibly could be Danny Fry, who's also missing. So they took a DNA sample from Danny's brother and compared it to the torso, and it was a match. This is David Waters' ex-girlfriend Patty, and she saw the story about them finding the torso and also the family missing, and she was terrified for her life. She calls the FBI and says that David rented a storage unit right around the time the family had disappeared. So they go to that storage unit and they also get some information that he was using this big canister that was full of bleach, possibly trying to clean up the scene. But he did miss one drop of blood that was underneath the wall, underneath some aluminum. And the DNA did match. There was 2 DNA hits belonging to Madeline and also her son, John. When they searched David's home, they had found documents belonging to the organization well after he was let go from the job. They also found firearms, which he is not allowed to have because he's a convicted felon. So they confront him with all this evidence, and he agrees to lead the detectives to Camp Wood, Texas, where the family has been buried. So they are digging for hours and hours, and eventually they find 3 bodies with their legs cut off. Finally, after 5.5 years, we've got our answers. They have found the entire family in this grave.
John had blunt force trauma to his head plus a plastic bag over his head. Now, they're not quite sure how Madeline and Robin had passed away, but they believed it was suffocation because they both had plastic bags over their heads. They also believed that their legs were cut off so it'd be easier to transport the bodies. But also in this grave, they did end up finding a human skull with a gunshot wound to the base of the head and also 2 missing hands. They did confirm this was in fact Danny's missing head and hands. Now, this was all about revenge. David was absolutely infuriated about what Madeline had said about him in her article. So all 3 men, David, Danny, and Gary, all kidnapped the family, forced John to withdraw that money, then convert it into gold, and then by the time that they sold his vehicle, they believed the family was already gone. But the main question here is, why did they end up murdering Danny? Well, apparently Danny likes to drink and he has a loud mouth. So they had a feeling he was going to say what they had done, and he didn't want that, so he ended up murdering him as well. Now, apparently David never got to enjoy any of that money because it was stolen from him as well. So David was found guilty and he was sentenced to 80 years in prison. And then Gary was found guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. Madeline always spoke her mind and never held back, but because she wrote an article about the wrong person, her life was brutally taken, all because of what she wrote in an article. Now, even though I don't agree with her beliefs because I am a Catholic, I would never wish harm on another person. Everyone's allowed to have their own opinions and beliefs. But because she wrote this horrible article about David, he was infuriated and is like, I'm going to get revenge on her and I'm going to brutally take her life as well as her family. And had 2 co-conspirators help him, but ended up murdering one of them because he was afraid he was going to talk. This story was absolutely wild in my opinion. Now, at first I thought they did take the money and just fled somewhere, but then you're getting to think, something's not adding up here. She was very well known back in the day, back in the 60s all the way up to the 90s. Now, I didn't really know much about her because I was born in the 90s, but, apparently she was at one time the most hated woman in the world. So if you guys remember her, let me know in the comments below and how you feel about her. But even though she was an atheist and didn't believe in God, she's allowed to have her opinions, but I still would never wish this on her. But let me know what you guys thought of this story in the comments. Thanks for watching. I love you all. We'll see you in the next one. And please take care of yourselves.